Members of the African intelligentsia, I greet you. I have entered the Palava Hut this afternoon because we have cause for concern. The Republic of Liberia is about to host a major Africom conference. You do recall Africom, headed by General Michael Langley, who has been in the news recently for his remarks accusing Captain Ibrahim Traore's government of using the country's gold reserves to protect his government or his junta, as they call it. So, in light of the need to position themselves to handle Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, AFRICOM is holding a West Africa Logistics Conference, the third of its kind on the continent, and this time it's being held in Liberia in August of this year. That's right around the corner. That's in 3 months. But first, I want to give you a brief history and overview of AFRICOM and why it was created. The U.S. Africa Command was established in October 2007 as a unified combatant command to coordinate U.S. military efforts in Africa. Pay attention to this. It was created to ensure the Department of Defense harmonized its activities with other U.S. government agencies and to support U.S. foreign policy goals in Africa. To support U.S. foreign policy goals in Africa. I mean, the part where they're supposed to be helping you, I'm not seeing it yet, but maybe down the road. Let's proceed. AFRICOM's creation was a response to the growing strategic importance of Africa, particularly in the context of the global war on terror and the need for a more focused approach to security cooperation and partnership building on the continent. I'll tell you what that means in a minute. Before AFRICOM, U.S. military activities in Africa were spread across three geographical commands: UCOM, CENTCOM, and PACCOM, leading to a lack of coordination and a less effective response to challenges. The growing strategic importance, the rise of global terrorism, including increasing American reliance on African energy resources, increasing American reliance on African energy resources, and the need to counter other powers' influence on the continent contributed to the recognition that Africa was becoming more strategically important. I hope you're hearing this and making the comparison to Langley's recent remarks. China and Russia's military and economic influence on the continent was a side issue, but they're more concerned about your fight against terrorism than anything else. Here it is, we're finding out that countering their influence was one of the key reasons AFRICOM was actually created. AFRICOM was designed to be a command that focused on strengthening partnerships with African nations rather than relying solely on direct military intervention. So, this thing is designed to make it look like they're here to work with you, is what that means. Make it look like they're here to work with you because this business of direct military intervention was beginning to look bad. Okay, that's why AFRICOM was created to look like a partnership with you, with your government's military. Let's look at the timeline. 2006, a planning team was formed to advise on the creation of a new unified command for Africa. February 6, 2007, President George W. Bush authorized the creation of AFRICOM. October 1, 2007, AFRICOM officially became operational, initially as a sub-unified command of the U.S. European Command. October 1st, 2008, AFRICOM transitioned to a fully operational combatant command, separate from the European Command, with its own headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany. So there you have it. When you boil it down to why AFRICOM was really created, you condense it into two main reasons. One, to counter other powers' influence on the continent, that's your Russia and your China. And two, to secure US access to Africa's energy resources, that's your oil, and here recently, your rare earths and other other minerals. They threw in that part about the war on the global war on terrorism to throw you off, knowing full well that terrorists are proxies for Western interests in Africa. They have to be able to destabilize your country and give themselves a reason to be there. But really, Africom is intended to make the fight for Africa's resources look a lot more palatable. And in 17 years and counting, this October, since it became fully operational in October of 2007, this October will make Africom 18 years old. And I'm trying to figure out where the success stories have been. This global war on terrorism that they highlighted as one of the main key reasons for its formulation is, as General Langley put it in that interview with Yvonne the other day, getting worse, with Burkina Faso, as he stated, being the epicenter of global terrorism. So, in almost 18 years, AFRICOM has not focused on the epicenter of the problem and now has the gall to be offended that Burkina Faso has decided to look elsewhere, along with Mali and Niger, for its security partnerships. And here in a Liberian newspaper, you see a photo of Brigadier General George Dietrich to the left. He is the U.S. Africa Command Director of Logistics. To the right, you see the Armed Forces of Liberia Chief of Staff, Major General Davison Follett. And several Liberian newspapers carried this report, this press release by the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia. And it reads, Liberia is prepared for its first West Africa Logistics Confab, U.S. Embassy announces. And I'm reading the story from the Inquirer newspaper in Monrovia. Quote, the United States of America government, through its embassy in Monrovia, has announced that the 2025 West Africa Logistics Conference will be hosted in August in Liberia for the first time. Building on the success of the 2024 Logistics Conference in Cameroon, this upcoming conference will serve as a vital platform for military and civilian leaders to address shared logistics challenges and respond across the spectrum of operations, end quote. So already they've picked a target. They've found an accusation against one of the men in the Sahel. They've made it stick with a testimony before Congress. Congress is going to approve this. And now they're mapping out the logistics to be able to attack and to sustain that attack to completion. We'll skip further down. Quote, in a statement about the event, AFRICOM Director of Logistics, Air Force Brigadier General George Dietrich, said, I'm thrilled to announce this significant milestone in ongoing efforts to strengthen regional collaboration and logistics capabilities across West Africa. According to him, the 2025 Logistics Conference will focus on enhancing interoperability, developing aligned logistics strategies, and resourcing readiness to ensure our collective ability to respond swiftly and effectively to regional challenges. You see, with these press releases, the devil is always in the details. So I want to pause here and I want to translate because military jargon can use flowery language to hide important information. First of all, this 3-year time frame since they've been holding this conference coincides roughly with the happenings in the Sahel. What a coincidence. And the United States is eager to focus on number one, enhancing interoperability. Logistics, members of the intelligentsia, is what makes it possible to conduct operations across a region, across a theater of war. And as you can see, it is being defined here on NATO's website as a science. Logistics is a science. This means that the logistics for a military operation can be planned with exactitude and to damn near perfection. So they want to focus on interoperability. That means that all of the other puppet governments in West Africa are going to be present and involved in this operation. Remember, this is not just an exercise that the United States is doing with Liberia. It's the West Africa Logistics Conference, and they held it in Cameroon last year. So now they're going to be focusing more than ever on enhancing interoperability. That means when they get ready to attack the Sahel, they need to be able to communicate smoothly and effectively and to work smoothly and effectively with Nigeria, with Ghana, with Sierra Leone, with Togo, with Benin, with Ivory Coast, especially Ivory Coast, because Ivory Coast is their key border with Burkina. I want you to take a look at this map of West Africa right here. In red, you have the nations of the Alliance of Sahelian States or the Confederation of Sahelian States, which in times of war will be considered a single theater of operation by those three states and by their enemies for that matter. And so I want you to take a look at the distance between Liberia and Burkina Faso and how strategically located Liberia is to this operation right now. Liberia is the most ideal and suitable location, and I wouldn't be surprised if Africom goes ahead and sets up a base, at least a logistics base, in Liberia because of the shared border between Ivory Coast and Burkina Faso and between Liberia and Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast is particularly important to this operation because of all of the nations bordering the AES. Ivory Coast straddles the border between Burkina Faso and Mali, two of the nations being targeted. All of the other nations have borders with only one Sahelian nation, except for Benin, I guess. Benin straddles the border a little bit between Burkina Faso and Niger. But yes, Ivory Coast is pretty much indispensable to this operation right now. Benin straddles the border between Burkina Faso and Niger. The problem is that Benin is a small country. In terms of heavyweights in Africa, you want the center of operations to be located in countries such as Ghana and Ivory Coast that have well trained armies and developed infrastructure. But expect to see Benin and Togo play a part as well. Ghana only has a border with Burkina Faso, but is still being counted on and heavily equipped by Africom for this operation. And we'll come back to Ghana in a minute. But because Ivory Coast shares borders with both Mali and Burkina Faso, you saw the French and others last year looking for space in Ivory Coast and Ghana, especially right there at the border, in order to be able to conduct operations in the Sahel. So that is why Liberia is of such strategic importance right now. You'll recall that on January 7th, just a few short months ago, Captain Ibrahim Traore paid a surprise visit to Ghana to attend President John Mahama's inauguration. You'll recall the warm embrace between the two men, the two heads of state. And from that time, many Africans thought that John Mahama was going to cross over from ECOWAS or at least support the alliance of Sahelian states in one form or another. And of course, he's been making diplomatic overtures. Shortly after his inauguration, he visited all three of the nations in the Sahel, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and had talks with them. He then returned to report to ECOWAS and since then has been playing sort of the middleman. All of a sudden, we received news here in the last few weeks that the United States had gifted the Republic of Ghana with a fleet of armored tanks. And where have they positioned that equipment? Right at Ghana's border with Burkina Faso. That is cause for concern. It causes one to question whose side John Mahama is now on. In addition to that, just a few weeks ago, around the end of April 2025, we saw the Asante Hine, the king of the Ashanti in Ghana, host troops from the British High Command. That's not a good sign either. Why would the king of the Ashanti be hosting troops from the British High Command? But all of that you see, the armored tanks, British troops visiting Ghana, members of the intelligentsia, logistics.
Proud to provide the finest equipment available to the Ghana Armed Forces. And these 14 armored personnel carriers are the latest example of that great tech and also of how Ghana and the United States working together strengthens both Ghana and the United States. In a world facing complex security challenges, no country can go it alone, as General Bitanu noted last month. At the African Land Forces Summit. Security challenges are just too complex for single actors to act alone. And that's why it's so important that Ghana is an exporter of peace. Whenever they are needed, the Ghana Armed Forces answer the call. Peace operations, border security, responding to national disasters, the GAF are always up for the challenge. Ghanaian service women and men have proven time and again that they stand ready to serve with honor and distinction. And I'm pleased that this equipment will help with that continued service.
This occasion is not just a symbol of the enduring partnership between our two countries. It is also a tangible expression of our shared commitment to peace, stability, and security within Ghana and across the West African sub-region. Your Excellency, this generous donation will go a long way in strengthening the operational readiness of the Ghana Armed Forces. These highly capable, mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles will enhance troop protection, mobility, and effectiveness in counter-terrorism operations and internal security efforts, including the fight against illegal mining in Galamsey. They are not only assets for national defense, but instruments for regional peace and global solidarity. Over the years, the United States has remained a dependable partner in capacity building journey of the Ghana Armed Forces, providing training, technical assistance, and equipment support. Today's handing over is yet another milestone in our enduring defense cooperation, and we are deeply appreciative of your continued support.
Members of the African intelligentsia, I am completely confused. So you need armored tanks to be able to fight Galamsey, the illegal gold mining trade in Ghana. Okay. You also heard Captain Ibrahim Traore during the interview he had with Russian media while he was attending the Victory Day parade at the invitation of Vladimir Putin. You heard him make reference to landmines that are being planted on his territory by terrorists.
Terrorists are reinforced by many foreign fighters who come from elsewhere, who are not Burkinabe. There are also trainers who come from many countries to teach them many techniques.
What is their interest?
It's not terrorism, it's imperialism. Their goal is to keep us in a permanent war so that we cannot develop and continue to lose our resources. And so, they have every interest in bringing specialists in mines to lay various types of mines, explosives, specialists. Today, terrorists use drones to fight.
You also heard the American ambassador say that the armored tanks that were gifted to Ghana are quote-unquote mine resistant. Now, given what Traore told us, that terrorists are being trained to lay mines on his territory, that should make sense to you now. The armored vehicles have to be mine resistant because when they turn around and invade the Sahel, Burkina Faso in particular, they don't want those mines to sabotage or hinder the operation. They need to be able to roll right on through. So they've gifted Ghana with mine-resistant armored tanks. Make no mistake about this, members of the African intelligentsia, this is a coordinated attack. They know exactly what they're doing. And in case you forgot, logistics is a science. So put the pieces of the puzzle together, which is what we're trying to do here. Because nothing that you see happening here is random. The dots are all connecting in this hour. You also saw the attack on Djibo just a few days ago, that town in Burkina Faso that came under terrorist attack. They were trying to dim the morale of the AES right on the heels of Captain Traore's triumphant return from Russia.
Some breaking news now in Burkina Faso. There are reports that 200 soldiers have been killed in attacks by an Al Qaeda affiliate. It happened in the northern province of Loroum. The attacks follow an earlier assault in which 60 soldiers were killed at a military post in the same province. Nearly half of Burkina Faso is not under government control, and attacks from armed groups linked Al Qaeda on the rise, not only in Burkina Faso but other African countries in the Sahel. Let's go to Nicholas Hack. He joins us live from Dakar. Nicholas, what more do we know about what happened?
Well, this attack took place in Djibo. That's around 200 kilometers away from the center of power in Ouagadougou. And according to an eyewitness, a teacher that works in the school of Djibo, he says the atmosphere currently is of fear, smoke, and destruction. It was an attack that lasted not hours, but days. And one of the major military outposts that's supposed to protect this town of about 200,000 people was razed to the ground. Such is the violence, or such is the firepower of the armed groups that was used during this attack. It's not just Sole, it's Djibo, it's also the town of Diapaga, where there was, according to eyewitnesses, Russian mercenaries involved there. So this is one of the deadliest attacks in Burkina Faso, and it comes just at a moment where Ibrahim Traore has been saying that the country has been gaining territory, actually encouraging people to go back to their homes. But this latest attack proves the opposite. But there has been no confirmation from the government of this attack just yet. Molly?
Make no mistake about it, members of the African intelligentsia, this is as much a battle for hearts and minds as it is a battle for territory. That attack was not random either. They're trying to build a case that says Burkina Faso is under attack and they can't do it alone, although they say they can. But obviously, they can't. And you don't have to take our word for it. Look, another attack in which 200 lives were lost. Obviously, they can't do it alone. So the leaders of the sub-region have called us in and asked us to help. Members of the African intelligentsia, this is called planting a problem and then presenting yourself as the solution. You heard the American ambassador say in that clip that a situation like this, with the regional security challenges, single actors cannot go it alone. She's talking about Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. 3 allied sovereign nations doesn't sound like going it alone to me. But hey, as long as the United States is not involved, you're going it alone, regardless of whoever else is with you, even Russia. West Africa is under attack by terrorists, and ECOWAS has called us in to help stabilize the region, and that's exactly what we're doing. That's why you see them partnering with various West African nations, Ghana, Liberia, Ivory Coast, etc., so that it doesn't look like neocolonization 2.0. It just looks like the leaders of West Africa have asked us to help, and that's exactly what we're doing. And so that should tell you that Michael Langley's testimony at Congress the other day wasn't just an instance of his being ill-informed about what was going on in Burkina Faso. It was part one of a very elaborate plan that is about to unfold here shortly. It was the validation, it was the political backing that he needed to be able to launch this attack. The whole thing was staged. It's called political theatrics. And no, Captain Traore, with all due respect, he is not going to apologize. It was all part of the plan. And so, for all we know, Ghana might say, well, the Americans have not told us that these mine-resistant armored vehicles are for invading the Sahel. All we know at this point is that these vehicles have been given to us to meet our own security challenges within the contiguous borders of the Republic of Ghana. Well, even if that were the case, tomorrow morning, the American ambassador could call, or the head of Africom could call the Ghanaian defense minister and say, hey, suit up, get those mine resistant armored vehicles ready. We're invading the Sahel in 24 hours. And there would be nothing that the Republic of Ghana would be able to do to push back against that kind of mandate. You also heard the US ambassador make reference to the Africa Land Forces Summit that she said was held last month. Yes, the Africa Land Forces Summit is the annual conference supporting the US Army Chief of Staff's activity in Africa. It is hosted by the Southern European Task Force for Africa, CTAF. Do you see that African militaries are not even sovereign? The Southern European Task Force for Africa is hosting the African Land Forces Summit every year. We're still colonized militarily. So understand that they're having these backdoor meetings with various military forces in the subregion. I want you to take a look at some of the topics that were discussed at this summit in Accra here last month. Plenary Session 1, Synchronizing Border Security within Africa. This session discussed the challenges and opportunities for effective border security management in the context of counter-military militant insurgencies and organized crime in Africa. I hope you're understanding. I hope you're getting the picture of just how comprehensive this effort is and just how they're hiding it under some kind of humanitarian goodwill. Because when they finally move in to attack the Sahel, this operation is going to be large scale. Plenary Session 2, Understanding and Responding to Disinformation Threats. This session discussed the rise of disinformation in Africa and how disinformation tactics, often foreign sponsored, can disrupt military operations, affect social morale, and public perception of the military. So, all of you YouTubers out there, you saw them take down African Streamline last year. That was a test run to gauge public reaction, and that channel was offline for a while. You've seen them shadow ban the channels of those of us who report on the AES from a uniquely Pan African perspective. All of you YouTubers who report directly from the AES news media outlets, FASO 7, Burkina Radio and Television, prepare to see them come after your YouTube channel like never before. That is because they don't want you boosting the morale of the AES. At the same time, exposing what the West is doing to sabotage the revolution taking place in the Sahel. I know for a fact that my channel is heavily shadow banned from the beginning. My channel is closely monitored by French forces out of Ivory Coast. So prepare to see your channels come under attack because they understand how information from social media YouTubers can spread like wildfire. Not just YouTube, but TikTok and other social media platforms. You saw the worldwide protests that were planned almost overnight in support of Ibrahim Traore. No, 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 no. That cannot happen anymore. So they're going to come for you YouTubers that are doubling as activists, social media activists for the revolution in the Sahel, especially those with large platforms in the hundreds of thousands of likes, views, and followers. And by the way, you heard them say, all of y'all are foreign backed. That means you're all on Russia's payroll. Plenary Session 3, Technology as a Force Multiplier for Combating Contemporary Threats. They even had AI experts, artificial intelligence experts, making presentations at this conference. So they're going to be leveraging technology heavily to help with their agenda to shut down the spread of the revolution from the Sahel into the rest of Africa. So, members of the African intelligentsia, that's what these people are doing. These are the kinds of meetings they're having. They're going over every detail with a fine tooth comb. They're leaving no stone unturned. This is a whole elaborate plan to shut down the Sahel from all sides, the info wars, information wars, diplomatic isolation, tactical warfare. They want to shut this down in every way possible. So, members of the African intelligentsia, pay attention to your nation states. If you see members of your country's military attending these various logistics conferences and summits, then you know that your country's government is actively preparing to take part in the planned attack against the nations of the Sahel. Make no mistake about how much money the United States will be pouring into this operation, into the logistics of this planned attack against Burkina Faso and its allies. And Ghana, Liberia, and other governments of ECOWAS are more than happy to be on the receiving end of that release. And if you're wondering why the main target seems to be Burkina Faso, it's because Traore is the lightning rod. He's the torchbearer of the revolution. See, Abdurrahman Chiani is a seasoned military expert. He's a veteran. He brings maturity and experience to the AES body. You notice he doesn't talk much. He works behind the scenes. His advice and guidance are invaluable in this fight, in this hour. Mali's Assimi Goita is the administrative head of the Confederation. He's an organizer. Ibrahim Traore, however, is the youngest of the three and the lowest ranking, but he's the main fear of the West. He's the orator. He's the inspiration. He is the one who communicates the vision to the continent's youth in a way that unites them and ignites their passion for free Africa. He is injecting the power into the youth. And you must never, ever, ever make the mistake of comparing him to someone like Barack Obama. Traore is not just an orator, he is a man of action. You can call him Traore Talk and Do. Anyway, back to the press release. I want to talk about a little bit about Liberia and why it's playing such a central role in the logistics operation right now. Liberia, as you know, has historical ties with the United States. Liberia was founded by freed slaves from the United States. So there's that shared history, that linkage between the two nations. And across the continent, Liberia has always been considered the only American colony, although it was never officially colonized. So there's a long history there dating back to 1822 when those freedmen arrived on the coast of what we now know as Liberia and established a republic that became independent in 1847. Liberian governments tend to lean heavily on the United States for support, every successive administration. And of course, the United States draws heavily on the history of that relationship whenever they want or need Liberia to be of use to them. Liberia, of course, would be jumping at an opportunity like this because of the amount of money that would be poured in, the opportunities as they see it that would be poured into the country for an occasion such as this. Liberia was a founding member of the Organization of African Unity and had a high standing in the Committee of African Nations. We hope to see in the future Liberia regain its status as a leader on the continent, being, of course, Africa's oldest republic. But as of right now, Liberia is awkwardly positioned as a nation of great need, and they jump at opportunities such as this. Just a few months ago, we saw the Liberian foreign minister visiting Burkina Faso and asking for Burkina Faso's support as Liberia was vying for a position on the United Nations Security Council. So the Liberian foreign minister and her delegation met with Traore. The meeting seemed cordial enough. And now, due to pressure from the United States, this is an offer that Liberia now feels they can't refuse. And so the Alliance of Sahelian States would do well to make mental note of the fact that Liberia can be fickle and that right now the script has been flipped and that Liberia is no longer on their side. You saw the Liberian government suppress the protest that was held in Monrovia in support of Ibrahim Traore, one of many protests around the world. Now, as a democracy, Liberia's constitution guarantees the freedom of assembly and the right to protest. But there was a reason for that. A few months ago at the United Nations General Assembly, Liberia's President Joseph Boakai stated that he was not going to stand by and watch ECOWAS be used to fight proxy wars on behalf of anyone. And that specifically, the Republic of Liberia was not going to mistreat Burkinabe refugees. We saw the government of Liberia, in collaboration with the United Nations, conducting programs to help Burkinabe refugees get properly identified and all of that. All of a sudden, there's been a switch, there's been a turn, there's been a flipping of the script. And the government of Liberia is cracking down on protests, including what we saw a few days ago, peaceful protests in support of Ibrahim Traore. And so that's where Liberia has positioned itself right now. So I know I digressed, but I had to bring you up to why Liberia is being used as a logistics base, if you will, for the impending operation at this time. But back to the press release on the West Africa Logistics Conference that is to be held in Monrovia in August by Africom. Now, why would any African country want to participate in anything that works against the nations of the Sahel, given how popular the revolutionaries are on the continent and around the world, with the anti neocolonialism fight they're waging on the continent? The answer to that is simple. The United States and its allies know how to pressure your government. That's why they have embassies in every single African country, not just because of the natural resources, but to keep an eye on all of the intricacies of your political process so that they can know your weak points, so that they can know your pressure points, so that they can know where to apply pressure when you fall out of line with what their agenda is in your country or anywhere on the continent as a whole. They can get you elected, they can get you unelected, they can manipulate your political problems. You did a lot of corruption in the first 5 years of your presidency, and America turned a blind eye as long as you were going along with their agenda. And then all of a sudden, you drew the line somewhere, and now they're about to put pressure on you and bring out all of your corruption records. And make no mistake, they do keep records of all of your corruption and everything that's going on in your country so that when they need it, they can pull it up. That is why any African country would be aiding and siding with the United States and its allies right now and would not want the trouble of standing against the United States in this or any matter. Because the United States knows how to throw the kitchen sink at you if you choose to distance yourself from any agenda that they're on at any given point in time. So let's finish up the press release on the upcoming logistics conference. So they want to focus on interoperability as number one. Number two, aligned logistics strategies. This means that all of the militaries around West Africa know exactly how this is supposed to work. This is not just going to be the United States sending a battalion of soldiers into Burkina with an outpost on the border with Ivory Coast, maybe running their own logistics and everything. This operation is going to require alignment of logistics between all military forces of the subregion. All of West Africa's military is in alignment with how the logistics are supposed to work. So, for example, if they're running out of bullets, Sierra Leone needs to know what to do. Nigeria, likewise, Ghana, so that everyone is on board with how this is supposed to work. Number three, they're enhancing resourcing readiness to ensure their ability to respond swiftly and effectively to regional challenges. This means how much money do we need to pull this off? What kind of equipment, arms and ammunition, personnel, drones, boots on the ground? How many do we need? Battalions, training strengths, various levels of skill in order to ensure their collective ability to respond swiftly and effectively to regional challenges. Members of the African intelligentsia, I need you to hear this. The idea behind this, the goal, is to now be able to respond swiftly and effectively to regional challenges, effectively and swiftly squash regional challenges. And by regional challenges, they mean Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. That's your regional challenges that they're here to confront. Not hunger, not education, not natural disasters. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. That's your regional challenges. Continuing, he noted the success of the 2024 Logistics Conference in Cameroon. That's General Dietrich. This upcoming conference will serve as a vital platform for military and civilian leaders to address shared logistics challenges and respond across the spectrum of operations. Do you understand the magnitude of this operation? They're putting all hands on deck with this. And Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, y'all need to be prepared for this. Because right here, you're hearing them say that they're going to be engaging military and civilian leaders to address shared logistics challenges. That's across the subregion. That means they want to be able to pull this off without a hitch. There will be no red tape hindering operations between General Christopher Musa's office and the office of the Nigerian president, between any military decision maker and his civilian government. Why is that important? Because the last time ECOWAS planned to invade the Sahel, you recall, D-Day had already been set according to their leaders. But the planned invasion was intercepted by Ghanaian and Nigerian parliaments, lawmakers in Ghana and Nigeria said absolutely not. You will not invade the Sahel, as well as other civil society leaders. So this time around, they're engaging military and civilian decision makers to be on board with this. The day they get up and say we're invading the Sahel, nobody is going to stop them. This operation is being planned to go off without a glitch, to be pulled off flawlessly. And they are anticipating all possible scenarios. This is what this August 2025 logistics conference is about. That whatever needs to be done needs to be executed seamlessly and with military precision. Quote, the logistics remains the backbone of all operations and is especially critical in a place as vast as the African continent, with Liberia being of no exception, General Dietrich said. You hear that? Logistics is the backbone. Once you can plan the logistics out, you can get it done. Also, key discussions at the event will explore supply chain security. Let's define that. For example, if they need to get weapons to the front line or from anywhere, they're bringing them. Or even troops, they need to be able to secure the mode of transportation. Because if Burkina Faso is able to intercept the convoy, that will be problematic. If Niger is able to intercept their supply of weapons, that will be problematic. Next, doctrine harmonization. Let's translate that. Any government that is military based is a target for this operation. That is why they just hurried Gabon's elections, because they don't want Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to be able to say, why are you attacking us? Gabon is a military leader too. No, that's why they hurried his transition into quote unquote democracy, so that he cannot be used as an example of a double standard. So doctrine harmonization means that if your country is not a democracy, you're a target. No exceptions. That's why Brice Oligui Nguema just got installed by a landslide as democratically elected president of Gabon. I mean, I had to do a double take. I could barely recognize the man. He had ditched the respectable military attire for a coat suit and a haircut. Continuing. doctrine harmonization, and sustainable procurement practices. That means who we're sourcing, who we're buying weapons from, and making sure that that source is sustainable. Quote, with an emphasis on empowering our African partners by strengthening our partnership network. We know that's not the case. They will tell you they will tell African governments exactly what to do, throw in some money, and that's exactly what will be done. It's not a partnership. There's also a weapons factory in Abuja. That's probably one of those partners they're referring to. Let's wrap this up. Quote, Liberia's selection as a co-host underscores its growing role in regional security and its commitment to fostering stability and cooperation. That means Africom is putting down roots in Liberia, and that we should all expect to see them use Liberia more and more as a launching pad and logistics base for their operations. Quote, I extend my gratitude to our Liberian partners for their dedication in preparing for this landmark event. General Dietrich asserted that over the coming months, U.S. Africa Command looks forward to working closely with the armed forces of Liberia and other West African partners to ensure a productive and impactful conference. The 2025 Logistics Conference will feature dynamic panels, partner led discussions, and practical exchanges to share best practices, lessons learned, and opportunities for collaboration. And together, we'll strengthen the logistics networks that underpin shared security and humanitarian goals, advancing peace, stability, and prosperity across the region. Listen, the devil is always in the details. They always use this flowery language to hide things. They're about to attack the Sahel. You heard after the last major coup attempt against Traore. You heard the spokesman of the Alliance of Sahelian States reveal that those funding it had intended to hold the Sahel down for the next 10 to 20 years. They want to be able to squash any signs of an uprising anywhere. And the logistics for that kind of operation, for that kind of quote unquote peace and security in the region, and shared security and humanitarian goals is what they're talking about here. Peace and security, quote unquote, in the region, as they see it, will require gridlock control that is based on logistical precision. But as we know, prosperity will not be part of the equation. It will just be peace and security for them to be able to get in here and get what they need and do what they need. Your prosperity as an African is not part of this equation. So please don't hold that promise to heart. So General Dietrich visited the headquarters of the Armed Forces of Liberia and was given high military honors, of course. The Armed Forces of Liberia Chief of Staff referred to the historical ties between Liberia and the United States. General Dietrich said that it was an obvious and inevitable choice for the Armed Forces of Liberia to host the third West Africa Logistics Conference. So understand this logistics conference is under the auspices of Africom. He announced that representatives from the U.S. Department of Defense will be in attendance, members of the African intelligentsia. This is a huge deal. Representatives from the U.S. Department of Defense will be in attendance. That lets you know how important this is, how big this is. Africom has also donated military equipment to Liberia and will be training personnel in the use of that equipment. Spare parts are also being provided. General Dietrich was warmly received by the Armed Forces of Liberia Chief of Staff, Major General Davison Fole, and was given high military honors by the Color Guard and the AFL Marching Band. So they rolled out the red carpet for this guy. The Armed Forces of Liberia Chief of Staff gave a brief overview of the historicity and commonalities in the all-time relationship between Liberia and the United States. by emphasizing the military doctrine of both countries. He further connected this all-time relationship to Liberia's first president, Joseph Jenkins Roberts, the naming of Liberia's capital after former US President James Monroe, and the glaring similarities in both countries' national colors. Listen, do you see what the Alliance of Sahelian States has been doing in taking down colonial type names and replacing them with their own national heroes, Thomas Sankara and the like? Compare that to this. Liberia's capital was named after former US President James Monroe. Liberia is still very much colonized. It's neo-colonized. And you see, a lot of African countries, ever since independence, changed their flags to their own national colors that reflect their identity as a people. You should see Liberia's flag. America's flag has red, white, and blue stripes with 50 stars. Is it 52? I don't recall. Liberia's flag looks exactly the same, but with one star. So Liberia, as Africa's oldest republic, is way behind in the Pan-African fight. Way behind. Liberia needs to change its name. It needs to change its flag, all of its national symbols, and it needs to change the name of the capital city. In 2025, no African capital city should be named after a former US president, a white one for that matter. General Follett, the Armed Forces of Liberia Chief of Staff, thanked the US government through Africom for selecting Liberia to host the third US Africom Logistics Conference that is expected to take place in August of this year. Wow. General Follett informed his guests that as the AFL prepares for the conference, arrangements for the shipment of the $20 million worth of military equipment donated to Liberia are nearing completion. Logistics, members of the African intelligentsia, requires money. So right now, in anticipation of this conference, Liberia is expecting the arrival of 20 million US dollars worth of military equipment. The West Africa Logistics Conference is an opportunity that brings together the entire sub-region to discuss logistics issues that could be solved collectively. Members of the intelligentsia, this is an issue. They are literally rallying all of West Africa's militaries to be able to attack the Sahel and to do it seamlessly. Think ECOMOG in reverse. Just one question. During the 20 years that European countries had bases in the Sahel, why couldn't they have mapped out the logistics in this fashion to fight the war against terrorism in the Sahel? And just within the last 24 hours, the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso challenged the United Nations over its silence in the face of terror attacks in the Sahel. Well, Mr. Ouedraogo, Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, the United Nations is silent because they're in on the plan.